So today we're going to build a full stack CRUD contact book application using Nextjs 14, in particular server actions. We're going to use Mongoose to query our database, MongoDB to store and organize our data, a little bit of Tailwind and Daisy UI for styling, and we'll go over a few other things. So here we have a simple contact book that we have the ability to create new contact. We have the ability to update contacts. And we also have the ability to delete contacts. If you're looking for a simple CRUD application to get you started using Nextjs 14 and server actions, this is going to be the perfect video. To kick us off, we'll start with a project folder that's located on the desktop, and we're going to open it in VS Code. And in your terminal, we'll type in the command npx create-next-app at latest, and we're going to name this directory my app and hit enter. And in this project, we're not going to use TypeScript. We will use the ESLint. We'll say yes to Tailwind, no SRC, yes to the app router, no import alias, and we'll give it a few minutes to complete its installation. All right, and once it's complete, be sure to cd into that directory. And we'll need a couple other dependencies, and we'll add some of the front-end libraries as we move along. But for right now, let's go ahead and type in mongoose, which is what we're going to use to interact with our database, and the DB of choice for today's video will be MongoDB. And I think that'll be all that we'll need for right now. We can always add more later, but make sure you're into that directory. Let's go ahead and install Mongoose and MongoDB, and then we'll press enter, and we'll give it a couple moments to install. All right, so now that we have that installed, let's go into the project folder. And first thing I like to do is within the gitignore file, let's add our .env file just to make sure that we are not uploading it to our repository. And within the my app directory, let's go ahead and add the file name .env. And if we want, let's go ahead and add another directory within my app called lib. And this is just going to hold some of our utilities. And for this video, we'll add a file named db.js. This is going to hold our connection function to MongoDB. And I'm going to copy that connection from one of my prior Git repositories. That way we don't have to type this out, and we minimize the likelihood of an error. So once you have this typed out, just pause the screen here. We do want to copy this this environment variable name, mongo_URL, and let's just paste it into our .env file. This is going to hold the connection string to MongoDB. That way we don't have to worry about having it within the actual code itself. We'll use it as an environment variable, and it'll help us with that connection to the database. So with that, we'll go into MongoDB. So I already have it up and open. And if you don't already have MongoDB, an account with MongoDB, just be sure to sign up. It's free, and you can walk through the steps of creating a project. It only takes a couple seconds, and that'll take you back to this particular window. So what I'm gonna do is, I don't recall what password I used for the connection string. So first what we'll do is we'll go to database access, and we'll go to edit. And for password, we'll click on edit. And I'm just gonna ask it to auto-generate one, show it. I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna paste it right here. And once we've done that, I think that's all we need. We'll go to update user. We'll go back to hide. We'll go to update user, and once we have it updated, let's just click on database, click on connect, and the first option, connect to your application, click on drivers. And once you click on drivers, it's going to take you to connecting to MongoDB, connecting with MongoDB driver. Of course, this is a node project. We've already installed MongoDB. So we'll come down and we'll copy this connection string. And let's just click close and reduce the size of this window and go back to Google. Now within our .env file, let's paste in that connection string and grab this password that we just created. And we can delete the password placeholder, replace it with the auto-generated password, and we can go ahead and close out these two files because we shouldn't need them anymore throughout this application. All right, so now that we have our database connection set up, let's go ahead and create the model that's going to organize the data within our database. So within the My App folder, let's create a directory called models. And we're going to call our schema a contact schema. So I'm just going to name this file contact.js. And within this file, this is going to hold the database schema on how we're going to organize our data within our MongoDB. So first thing we want to do is we want to import mongoose because that is what we'll be using to query our database. And once you have mongoose, we want to create a contact schema. And we want to set that equal to new mongoose.schema. And within this object, we want to have some features. We want to have some data that's going to be organized within the database. The first data that we want to store is a first name. And this is going to be a type of string because this is going to be characters that will enter through our Nextjs front end. And we can just set this to required as true just for checks and balances. You can leave it blank. I'm just going to set it required true. And let's make it a little easier on ourselves. And let's copy this. And we're going to paste this in 2 more times, one for last name, one for email, and we'll do one more for phone. So let's just update this code and change first to last, change first name to email, and let's change this first name to phone. And the type for the phone is a number, so we'll change it to number. And I also like to store the timestamps as well. I don't think we're going to include it for this project, but as we're building, you never know, we may want to add it in, and we'll set the timestamp storage to true. And then now that we have the schema built, let's export it. That way we can access it throughout the application. And we're just going to name this mongoose.models. And this is going to be .contact, which is going to be the name of the schema, the way that we'll access it in the server files. And we'll go with mongoose.model. And we're going to name it contact. Well, its name is contact, excuse me. And we'll go contact schema. All right, so let's go ahead and save this file. I think we've typed everything in correctly. If not, we will certainly be notified as we continue to build out the project. And now that we have that installed, we can go ahead and start to actually work on our front end. So before we spin up the application, let's do a little bit of cleanup within the app and pages directory. So first, we'll go in the app folder and we'll click on page.js. And within this file, let's remove the main HTML tags that are currently holding the boiler code for the project. And I'm just going to name the homepage homepage. Well, excuse me, you know what? Let's remove this code and let's change this to a, let's use the RFCE Visual Studio Code React template. And let's change the page name to homepage. Because we're using server actions, we're going to need asynchronous functions. And it's just a little easier to change this to an async function and then to do an await callback within the function itself. So with that, on this home page, we'll just click save. And the next cleanup I want to do is within the global CSS file. Let's just go ahead and remove all of the boiler code within it. And In our terminal, we haven't started it just yet, so we will need a couple other dependencies for styling purposes, but we'll get to those in just a moment. But right now, let's just make sure that our server is running or that our project works without any error. So within the terminal and within the project directory, let's type in the command npm run dev and press enter. And this should spin up our Nextjs application, provided we don't have any errors or any issues. So we'll give it a moment. And it looks like it is up and going. So I'm just going to open another tab, and we'll go to localhost 3000. And voila, as you can see, we have our home screen listed here, or home page listed here on the window. So before we install any more dependencies, let's just go ahead and work on some styling of our overall layout. And within the MyApp folder, let's create another directory called components. And the first thing I want to do is just add some heading text. And I'm going to create a reusable heading text file because I want to use this same fonts and styles on different pages of the application, and versus just retyping it in, we'll just create a reusable component. So we'll create a file within the components directory called heading text, and this is strictly optional. Feel free to use or not use this based on your preference. So I'm going to use the React template to create a little boiler, and once I have the boiler, the next thing we want to do is pass in some children within this. That way we can dynamically change this, or that way we can change this on various pages. And what I want to have here is a title and description, description. And we can remove this code, and let's replace it with a section tag. Now, this code is going to be inserted at the top of the page, so I want to give it a little bit of padding. So we'll start with padding on the X, then padding on the Y. And within this, we'll have a div to hold the H1, H2, or H3 elements that we're going to use. And we want them to be, we want this div to be flex, and we want the direction to be a column. Let's make the item centered. And we're going to say justify center to have the text centered on the x-axis, on the y-axis, and the item center for it centered on the x-axis. So now I want an H1, and we'll give it a class name for styling. We'll say text centered, although it should be centered. Let's just make sure. We'll go small text, put an L instead of a colon, small text, let's go 3XL, and then let's go text 2XL, and I want to set the font to medium, and we'll set margin bottom to 2. We'll go text gray, and let's set it to 800, and this will represent the title. So we're going to pass this in as we're going to use the curly braces for to denounce that this is JavaScript, and we're going to pass in the title. That way we can reuse it, and anything that we set the title will have this styling that's within this heading text component. Then underneath it, we want to have an H3 and give it a class name, and we're going to give it of text of extra small because this is just going to be the description text. And I want to set the color to this text to orange, and we'll set it orange 400. We'll go tracking widest, and this is just for styling of the font. We'll go font medium again, and we'll give it a little bit of margin bottom of 2. And this will represent the description, and we'll pass in description here. That way it can be, the description will have this styling. And then last but not least, I just want to have a little border at the bottom. Totally optional. You don't have to include it. All of this is, for that matter. It's not necessarily a part of the CRUD functionality, but I did want to give a little bit of styling to our app so that it's not so generic. So once you add this code in, just to give a little bit of styling or for a border, Let's save the file and go back to our page.js. And within our page.js, let's remove this div and give it a main HTML tag. Excuse me. And within the main, the first component we want to have is the heading text that we just created. And we'll create the closing tag. And we want to give it a, let me save and refresh the screen. So you see the border is already appearing, which is great. So with the border appearing, now we just want to add in the title for the page that we want. And I'm going to name the title for the page to be Contact Book, because that's what we're building. And we'll give a description of all contacts below. That way we know we're on the home screen and we know that all contacts for our application are listed here below. So now that we have this portion taken care of, next we'll want to add a nav bar. And it's going to be a very simple nav bar. It's just going to have a button to take us to the contact page, to create a new contact, and also a link back to the home page. So let's go ahead and add that now. So we can close out the heading text file because we should be done with it. And within the components directory, let's add another file named navbar.js. And within the navbar, we'll start with the RFC template. And let's just save this and add it to the home page. That way we can see it real time as we're building it. So if we add it in, we see that we now have navbar listed on our main home screen. So within the navbar, we're going to update the div by removing it and replacing it with nav. And inside of nav, let's give a class name. We want the items to be set to flex. We want to give it a little bit of, we want to give it a gap of 6. And I tell you what, let's add in link. And we'll set this link name to home. That way we can see the home screen if we click on it. So let's just click on it and we have home listed here. And in the terminal, I'm going to open up another terminal, and let's go ahead and cd into our project directory. And I want to install React icons. We're going to use a couple icons on the page, totally optional just for styling purposes. So in the terminal, type in the command npm I react icons and then press enter. And I tell you what, we only need one more dependency. So let's just go ahead. I want to use Daisy UI to help us with one of the models. We could style it. We could code it with just JavaScript, but that'll be a little more lengthy of a video, and I don't want to take up too much of your time for a simple CRUD app. So first thing we'll do is we'll install the dependency of Daisy UI, and then we'll press enter. And as that being installed, the next thing we'll need to do is grab the plugin. And this plugin is going to be used on the tailwind.config file. So if we go back into our My App directory and we click on the tailwind.config file, we have plugins listed here. Just paste in the plugin that we got from Daisy UI. Save that file. I typed another character. And I can go ahead and close it out. And let's close the terminal for right now. We'll probably use it later on for troubleshooting purposes if needed. But that should conclude the dependencies that we need for right now. So now that we have Daisy UI and React icons installed, excuse me, let's go ahead and install a few icons. So we'll go import the open and close braces, and we'll go from, and if you type in React icons / I like to use the FI icons personally. Feel free to use whatever icons. If you want to use icons at all, you can use Font Awesome, excuse me, SVGs, box icons. There's several out there. So the first one we're going to add is the plus circle. And I also want to add a F5 for home as well to go with our home link. So let's update this to remove the home for right now. And let's add the FI icon And next to, let's add a span, the FI icon, let's add span, and let's type home. Let's hit save. And as you can see, we have a icon and the word home listed here on the screen. So now to bring those in a row versus stacked as a column, on the link, let's add a class name and let's just set it to flex. And let's set the items to center. That way they are aligned with each other. And you can see it's centered now. And let's add a gap of 4 just to give it that's too much. Let's go gap with 2. And let's make it 1. There we go. So you see we have a little space between the 2 characters. So that works out perfectly. And with those, we can actually just copy this and paste it in again. So you see now that we pasted it again, we actually have 2. So I want to have some space between these 2. So let's go justify between. We'll go and save it so we can see it. Yep. We'll go item centered. And let's go cursor pointer right here. That way, there we go. All right. And let's change this icon to a plus circle and save. And we see we have it updated. And let's change this from home to create. And we'll also last but not least, we'll update the href to be /create, and we need to create the create page. So if we open our editor and go into the app directory, the beauty with Nextjs is in order to create a additional route or page, all we need to do is add the page name, and add page. We need to add a folder with the page name, and then within that directory, add page.js. So we're going to name this page create. And inside of the create directory, we'll add a file named page.js. Actually, you know what? Let's change this name to contact versus create. No, we'll keep it create. We'll keep it create. And we'll click save, and let's go back and we'll give it the RFC template. We'll go create page. We'll hit save, and we should be able to close this out. Let's just check it. And as you can see, it's taking us to the create page. So then we'll hit back. So with the create page set up, that's going to basically lead us to the next section of our project, which is having the ability to create a contact within our database. So on the create page, let's remove this div and let's replace it with a section. And for our section, let's how do we want to do this? Let's add a what do we do on our main screen? So we didn't have anything extra, so we'll just keep it consistent. Let's bring in the heading text. And let's add a title. Sorry about that. Let's call this create contact. Well, we can go add contact. And let's just see what we have on the screen. Let's go to create. So there we have add contact, and we'll go with description, and we'll say add contacts below. And then let's hit save. So now we have our create page here. Let's just build out the I tell you what, so before we build out the contact page, we'll need a way to interact with our database. And we're going to use server actions, so that really minimizes the amount of code that we need to use in order to build the function that's going to go from our user interface, interact with our server and our database. So let's create, or I tell you what, let's not create. Within our lib directory, let's add a file named action.js. And this is going to represent the actions within our application. So we're going to have a couple, well, maybe we're going to have 3 total actions, and we'll build them one by one. The first action will be to add a contact. The second action will be to delete a contact. And the last action we're going to add is to update a contact. So this particular file is going to hold all of the actions of our database. And as I mentioned, we're going to be using server actions. So because this file is going to be a server file, we have to distinguish it as a server file. So at the top of this file, let's type in use server. That way, Next knows that this is going to be a server file that we're using. And then once we've typed in use server, let's import our contact model, and this is what we built earlier to organize the contacts within our database. And then we want to add in a connection to the database, so we'll go import DB, and this was the database function that we created earlier. And then we'll need to add in a couple imports to validate and to redirect us once we have created our contact. So we'll go import and we'll go revalidate path. And this is coming from Nextjs. And we'll also go with redirect. RECT. And this is going to come from next/navigation. We'll hit save, and then let's go with, I'm not sure we're going to need this one, so I'm going to comment it out for right now. So we'll go with export default. Let's create the function, and we're going to call this function add contact, and we're going to use this function within the form on our contact page as the action instead of using the use state and use effect hooks. So we'll go with add contact, and it's going to be an asynchronous function. And we're going to pass in the form data that we get from our front end. And within our add contact function, we'll start by grabbing the objects that come from our form. So we're going to pass in a first name, a last name, email, and phone, the exact same fields of the model that we created for our contact. And we're going to set this equal to object.form entries. And the form entries are going to come from form entries, and wrong one, form data. And within this, or underneath this, we want to have a try-catch block to catch any errors. And we'll always start by connecting to our database. So we'll go db.connect. And we'll create the variable to save the new contact. So we'll go const new contact. And we'll set that equal to new contact. And we want to pass in the information that we're getting from the form using this model for those contacts. So we'll have first name, last name, email, and phone. And then once we pass it in, we want to make sure that we await this validation, and then we want to save our new contact. So we'll go new contact.save. And if we get any errors, we don't need to return anything to the browser for this. And if we get any errors, we want to throw new error. And we'll go failed to create contact. And then we'll get the error listed here. That way, if we get an error, we can see what the error is, and it'll be fairly easy for us to troubleshoot it. So with that, let's go ahead and save this file, because that just allowed us to create our first action. And we'll go back to our page.js, and underneath the header, let's add another div. And we'll go class name, we'll go flex column. And let's see what it looks like. Let's just go test. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So here, and we'll go items centered, justify center. And now we want to create the way to interact with our database. And of course, we're going to use a form to do so. So instead of passing in the form directly, and that form will need to have client-side functionality, and this is going to be a server-side page. Let's go ahead and add in another component. That way we can pass the form to this page, and we'll call this component, the file name for it, createform.js. And we'll start with the use client distinguishing up top. That way we know that this is a client-side component. Let's save that file and create the RFC or add the RFCE template. Now, if we save this and we go back to our create page, let's type in create form and close it off and hit save. And as you can see, we have our create form listed here. So now if we go back to the form itself, let's start by adding in, well, actually, we don't need to add anything right now. Let's start by removing the contact form word and just having the div listed here. First thing we want to do is add our form. And with this form, we're going to pass in an action. And the action we're going to pass into it, we want it to call the add contact that we just created. Let's see, export add contact. Why is it not? Let me see, did I save it? No, I didn't put the const. Export const, not default. There we go. Sorry about that. So now if we go back to the create form and let's just remove the C, there we go. So now we could just import this action, add contact, within our form, and we see that it is now imported into the contact form directory. So with that, we can go ahead and continue to build out the contact form itself. So I'm just going to give this form a little bit of styling. This is totally optional. Feel free to use it or style your form to your liking, but I'm going to give it a little background color of 100. I want to set the item centered. We'll give it a little bit of padding, and I want the edges to be rounded, and we'll hit save. I know you can't see anything just yet. So first things first, let's add a div. So now we want to update the inputs, and this is just going to be a little bit of styling to the inputs. You don't have to follow this. This isn't relevant to the actual server action itself. So I'm going to set the first div with a class name of flex and give it a margin bottom of 4. And within this div, I want to add one more div, and we'll give it a class name of width -1/2 to give it to take up half of the space, and we'll give it a padding right of 2. And within this div, let's add a label, and we'll set this. It's pretty simple. We shouldn't have to. Let's set the class name. I want to set the text color to gray. Let's make this 700. And the first one is first name. Let's see what we get. Okay. And we see that we have the gray padding or the gray background with some padding that's on our form. And we see we have the label of first name. Underneath this div, we're going to add in, you know what, instead of having to retype in these inputs over and over using the same code, let's just create a reusable input component. So in the components directory, let's add a file named input with a capital I.js. And we'll give it the RFCE React template. And we're going to make this a reusable prop as well. So I want to pass some information to it that I can use to recreate or to make unique throughout the application. The first thing is going to be a placeholder. a type, because we're going to need to change the type. Everything is going to be a type of text except for the phone, which will be a number, so we'll need to change it. And the last thing we'll certainly need to change is the name. Excuse me. This is going to represent the names of our input fields that will be distinguished by the server when we're looking to add in new contacts in the contact form. So within this div, we want to add some styling. That way we don't have to continue to retype the same thing. So first up is, sorry about that. First up will be input. We can remove this. And we'll just type in the element input. And we'll add the closing tag. We'll first want to give a placeholder. And we'll set this equal to placeholder. That way we can change it. We'll set type equal to type. And we'll set name equal to name. And the last thing we want to add is a class name for styling, because we don't want to continue to have to retype this this styling over and over. I mean, I guess we could have copied and pasted, but the more formal way to do it is to create a reusable component. So the styling that we want to have for our input is pretty lengthy, so just bear with me. We want to set it rounded to large. We want to set the border to transparent. We'll go flex 1, which sets the size. We'll go appearance none. We'll go border. We'll set the border to gray, just a little darker than that. We'll go 300. The width is going to be full, not fill, full. Padding on the Y of 2. Padding on the X of 4. We'll set the background to white. We'll set the text color to gray of 700. We'll add the placeholder color to, I think that's just gray. All you gotta do is placeholder dash gray dash 400. Let's give it a little bit of shadow of small. We'll also add the text as base. Let's go with focus. We'll set the focus to outline of none. Let's go with focus, F-O-C-U-S, ring of 2. And we'll go with focus ring of, let's go with orange. And I think we set it to 400. That way we have a little bit of consistency. And last but not least, we'll have the focus border set to transparent. Now, if we save this, I don't think I have any typos here. Full width, boom, 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 boom. Now, if we save this file, that concludes what we need for the input. So we can close it out. And let's go back to our create form. And within the create form, let's go ahead and utilize that input that we just created. And if we type in the capital I input, we don't want to use this one. We want to use, make sure, yep, saved it. Let's go back to the form, UT. Make sure you get the one that is the /, meaning that it's coming from the same components or the same directory that this is in. That's going to give you the input prop that we just created. Let's add the closing tag, and if we save it, we see that we have an input here, but it's blank because we haven't added in any of the information. So we'll start by going with a type of text. We'll go with a placeholder of first name, and I want to go with no space. We'll add a name of first name, and that's it. So that gives us the first name, and what we can do is we can go ahead and just copy from the div class. We can copy this first div, and let's just go underneath the closing tag of this div, and let's add in another, let's paste in the copied div that we just added. And if we hit save, we see that we have the first name, two first names right next to each other. So let's update this. Let's change this first to last. And we'll change this placeholder to last. And we'll change this name from first to last. Just be sure that this casing, the main thing, is the exact same casing that you use for the properties within the schema model. So if you have the camo, you have the lowercase first letter, uppercase distinguishing of the next name. Make sure you have the same format, otherwise it won't work. But once you've updated the last name, the type is text, the placeholder is last name, and the name is last name, you're set. So now what I want is I want a separate row to have the email and the contact number. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and copy this initial div. Hit copy, and underneath that second closing div tag, we're going to paste in what we just copied. And if we hit paste and hit save, you'll see that we have it duplicated to the second row. So what we'll do here is we'll change the first label to email, keep the text, or excuse me, keep the type to text, and we'll change the placeholder to email. And save so you can see it. So you see it updated there. And very, very, very important is that you change this name to email and hit save. And in this last label, I'm going to change the last name to, we'll go contact number. And we'll we'll change this type to number. Remember the phone, we have it, the type for our database. The database is going to be looking for a number. And then we'll hit save. And then we'll change this placeholder to contact number to match the label. And then the name is very important. If I recall, we changed the model, we have the phone number portion named as phone. And if you forget, just go back to the model to be sure. Yes, we have it listed as phone. So we'll close this file out, and we have the contact number listed as name. We have the contact number name listed as phone, the type listed as number, and the placeholder is contact number. So the last thing we'll need to add on this to ensure that we can actually utilize this form is a button. And we'll set the type to submit. And we'll just add in, we'll say create contact. Hit save. And I'm gonna add a little bit of styling to the button. We'll go with class name, and I'm gonna go BTN This is from Daisy UI. And if we save it, we see that we have a button right here that is the wide property. And I'm gonna change the background to orange, ORANGE, and I'm gonna set it to 400 to keep it consistent. Excuse me. And let's go with justify center. No, we'll keep it as is. And with that, that sets our contact form. Now we can actually try this out by typing in our first contact. So I'm going to type in JJ, and I'm going to type in Jace as the last name. Email will be jace@gmail. Phone numbers will be all 9s. If we hit create contact, I should have set the redirect. So let's just check the database to see if it connected. We'll go to browse. And let's just open this up. Log back in. Give it a moment. We'll go to database, browse collections, And we see we have our first contact that we just created, so it did work. But what I do need to do, and I don't know why I didn't think I would need it, let's go back to our actions. And let's add in the, well, I see I didn't add either one, so that's part of the issue. But let's add in the revalidate path. I'm gonna set that to /, and I'm gonna go ahead and add in the redirect as well. And we'll set the redirect to go back to the home page. So now we'll close this file out temporarily. Let's go back to our project, refresh the screen, and let's go with RR, red, and let's go with red. Let's go with ed@gmail.com. Let's set that as our number. Let's hit create, and you see it took us back to our home page. So it should have worked. I didn't see any errors. And we can close out Daisy UI. And if we go back to our database and let's just click on test so it reloads and go back to our documents, you see that we now have the second contact listed within our database. So we see that we have the ability to create new contacts. So now that we can create new contacts, it'll be awesome if we could actually see those contacts, in particular on our home screen. So let's add in the function that's going to allow us to get all contacts from our database. So within the lib directory, let's add another file named data to represent the data itself, .js. And within this file, we're going to start by importing. We'll set this set to use server. And I don't think you have to on this one, but we're going to try. If we get an error, we'll remove it. We'll start by importing the database first. And we need the contact model so we know what we're grabbing. And let's go with export const, and we'll call this get contacts. And well, let me slow down for a second. So this file is going to contain all of the GET requests that we're going to make to our database. And for this project, we're only going to need two. The first one is going to be to get all contacts. And the second one is going to be to get the contact by ID if we want to update, delete, or just view that contact individually. But we'll start with getting all contacts first. So we'll go export const get contacts. We'll set it equal, and remember it needs to be an asynchronous function. We're not going to pass anything into this particular function, but we are going to have a try catch block, and we'll start with our DB connection first, and then we'll create a variable to hold all contacts. So we'll call it const contacts, and we're going to set it equal to await contact. And we'll go with find, and we want to set a to find all of the contacts within our database using this contact model that we imported. And we do want to return something back to the browser. We're going to return, contacts. And in the event that we get an error, we'll go within our catch portion. So we'll go throw new error, and we'll go fail to fetch or get contacts. Thank you. And it's just got some coffee. Thanks, my dear. And we'll add in the error. That way, if we get an error, we will see it within the console. We don't need to do any validation or send anything back to the browser for this one. So we'll just go ahead and click save. And I'm going to keep the file open just in case we made a mistake, or I made a mistake, excuse me. And back on our main home page, underneath the nav bar, I want to have the ability to see all of our contacts listed here. So we're going to display those in a table, and you could display them any way you want. I just find a table to be probably the most organized way to do so. And if you wanted to add on to this project, you could always add a search bar. You could set filters. You can sort as well. I think a table gives you a little more versatility on the ways you could be creative with the project. So we'll add a table. So underneath that nav bar, let's add a div. and this is going to hold the table. So I want to give it a class name, and I'm going to set the table to auto. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to set this class name. Let me slow down to flex, and I want the flex direction to be a column. I'm going to give a little bit of padding on the X and some padding on the Y as well. And I probably could have just combined these, but I like to separate them out just in case we don't like the finished product or if we want to toggle it a little bit. So now we want to create the table that's going to hold. I'll tell you what, let's add a div to be safe. Let's create the table and let's give it a class name of table auto. And we want the width to be set to full. Let's set the text to center, and I want to have the white space as no wrap, and close off that table. And let's add the closing tags, and the first portion will be the table head, and we want to give it a table row, and we want to give it a table heading. Now we probably should create a reusable component for this, but I'm gonna try to minimize some of the code here. So this first header is going to be first name, and I'm just going to add it so we can see something on the screen. There you have it right there. And I want to give this header some styling. So I'm gonna give it a class name. I'm gonna give it some padding on the X, Y. We'll go with title of font. Let's go with the text to be center, tracking be wider. This is purely optional. I'm not going to describe too much of it, but feel free to style it however you like. Grade 700. We're going to set the text to small, the background color to 100, and we'll go rounded, and we'll go rounded on the bottom as well. And let me save this. And as you can see, it updated our table header. So underneath this header, we're going to add one more. We're going to add a few more, excuse me. Table header. And we'll set this, we'll give it a class name as well. Well, first let's name it. We'll set it to last name to make sure the layout is appropriate. And yep, it looks good. And I think I'm gonna stay consistent and just keep everything cased as it is. And we'll reuse this class name for the others. I just wanted that first one to look a little different. So for this one, we'll give it padding on the X of 4, the Y of 3. We'll set the title to font. We'll set the text to center. We'll go tracking be wider. Tracking, not trackering. Wider. Font will be medium. Text will be gray of 700. And let's make this text small. And we'll set the background to gray. What we have up here? 100. Yep, 100. Let's save it. And as you can see, this is what it looks like. So instead of retyping this 2 more times, 3 more times, excuse me, I'm just going to copy this header and paste it in 3 more times. And I'm going to update this last name to email. We'll update this last name to contact number. And the last one will make action, and this is going to hold a button to delete or edit or see more of the contact that we have listed. So once we save this file, that's going to care for the actual header itself. Next up, we're going to need the body. So underneath the closing T-head tag, let's add in a T-body tag. And within it, we want to loop over the contact information that's in our database and display the columns within our database, or excuse me, the contact object within our table. So we want to display the first name, last name, email, So the first thing we'll need to do is gain access to the function that we just created. Excuse me. So if we go back up to the top and underneath the home page, let's give ourselves access to it by creating a variable named contacts and setting it equal to await. And we'll need to make this async since we have an await there. And go ahead and begin to type in get contacts. And it should automatically import in. And it'll also help if I put the async on the appropriate side of the parentheses, not behind it, but in front of it, excuse me. So if you save your file, you shouldn't see any errors. And this is going to give us access to the contacts object. Now we'll just need to map and loop over that object and display the data from it. So we want to use JavaScript in order to gain access. And we're going to go contacts.map. And we want to name each one of these contact. And we'll create the arrow. And for each contact or for each item within this object, we want to create a row. And that row is going to hold the key. We want to make sure that we set the contact, and we want to set the key as the contact's ID. And then we want to pass in table data. And the data we want to style a little bit. We want to give it a border top of 2. We'll make sure the text is centered since we centered the other text. We'll set the border to gray, and we'll set this one to 200 since we set the others to 100. We'll give a little bit of padding on the X, some padding on the Y. Let's close off that tag. And within this table detail, let's pass in contact dot first name, just to make sure that it is working. Let's hit save. Excuse me. And you can see the names of the first 2 contacts that we created, JJ and RR. So we know that is working. So I'm going to just copy this file and I'm going to paste it in 3 more times, one for last name, one for email, and one for contact. And we'll change the first one to last name. Excuse me, and hit save. And as you can see, we see Jason Red from the database. And if we change this from first name to, I think we had email next, you see that we have the email now appearing. And if we change this first name to phone, you see that we now have the contact number appearing within the table. So the only other thing that we want to include next is links to the action links, and the action links are going to be to edit and to delete. So I want to have some icons to represent that. This is optional. You could type in the word edit or update and delete. And as long as you have the same wrapping for the IDs and the button to delete, it's going to work just fine. But I do want to add just a little bit of styling or to give it a little bit of design. Feel free to update this as you want. So we're going to go import, and we want to import the React icons. So we'll go icons, and we're using the FI. And the first one that we want to use is FI trash for delete. And we want to go, the other one is FI, and it should be edit. And we'll hit save. And if we go back down to the table, underneath this last table detail, let's add another table detail tag. And we're going to give it a class name. And we actually can just copy this same code, but we are going to add, it should be PY. Just caught that. That's why it's good not to copy and paste. And it's better to create reusable components, but I just want to keep this simple. There we go. And within this table detail, we want to have 2 things. The first thing we want to have is a link to the edit page that we haven't created just yet. And we're going to name that page contact slash, and we're going to pass to it the ID. So we'll go, we're going to dynamically pass the ID. So we'll go $ brackets, and we want to give this contact contact.id. That way it knows to go to the ID of that particular contact that we click on. And we're going to have the FI edit icon listed here to represent the way to get to that page. So you can see the icon is appearing now. And let's just make sure that it works. So let's create the contact page. So within the app folder, let's add another folder named contact. And let's add another folder within it of open bracket, ID, close bracket. This is going to this is React's or Nextjs way of identifying that we're going to dynamically pass an ID to it, and it's going to be looking for it. So within the ID directory that's in the contact directory, let's add in a file named page.js. And for right now, just to make sure that it works, we'll type in the RFCE template, and let's rename this page to single contact. Let's hit save, and we'll go back to the page.js, and it should take us to the page. It won't display the data because we need to create the GET request for it next, but let's just make sure that it takes us to the page. If we click on that file, or that link, excuse me, you see that it takes us to the single contact page that we just created. So great, we see the routing is working perfectly. Oh, I'm sorry, let's look at this too. And if we look in the URL, you're gonna see that it is passing the ID of the contact that we just clicked on. So this number that we're seeing here that ends in 6399, if we go back to our database and we open the file up, we're gonna see that we clicked on this contact, and it is passing in that ID dynamically of 6399. So great, it is working as designed. So let's just go back to our home page. Now we'll need to add the button to delete. So underneath this link, we'll need to add a form. And we're going to come back and pass a action to this form. We're going to pass a delete contact action that we haven't created just yet. But within this form, we do need to pass in the ID of the contact that we want to delete. So I'll go ahead and add it now. So in this input, we want to type in hidden because we don't want the user to see this input field. Let's give it a name of ID, and we'll give it a value of, I think this should be default value. We'll give it a default value of contact.id, and let's just save it to make sure nothing broke. Nope, nothing broke. And now within this form, let's add in the FI React trash icon, and I'm gonna give it some style. And we'll go color. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just make sure we can see the thing first. Nope. I need to just remove that. Is it gonna make me delete the whole thing? Yeah. Let's remove that. Sorry about that. And let's just save it. And as you can see, we have the trash icon listed there. So let's do this. We do need to put this in a button, and let's copy that icon. Let's go button, and let's give this button a type of submit. Let's hit save. And before we worry about adding in the additional pieces to this, let's just style this a little bit. So I'm going to change this to flex, and I'm gonna go with item centered, and we're gonna give it a gap of 2, and that should take care of that. And that's still a little off. I tell you what, let's go with gap of 1. And do I have any margin top here? I know it's because this is a button. That's the reason why it's a little off. But I'll go with class name. Let's go margin top of 1. Let's go with 2. There we go. That'll work. And I want to set, I want to make this color red. So I'm going to go with style. And to let it know we're going to do a little bit of JavaScript. Let's set the color to string it. Yep, red. And there we have a red delete trash icon. So we have the design. We see that we are able to create contacts and we're able to display those contacts onto our home page. Now we want the ability to see individual contacts if we click on it. So let's work on styling our single contact page. So if you click on that single contact page, you should be redirected to the single contact. Or excuse me, if you click on the edit icon, you should be redirected to the single contact page. And if you check your URL, you should see the ID of the contact that you just created. So on this page, we want to bring in a couple things to give it some styling. So let's just go to the page.js that's within the contact folder, that's within the ID folder. Within this page, let's start by removing the, I'll tell you what, let's start by doing a couple imports. The main import that I want to have listed on this page is we can bring in the head, not the main, but let's bring in heading text. And let's just go ahead and bring in input. And I also want to bring in navbar. I know we could have put this in the layout and it would have been a little, probably reduce some of this code. But for right now, this is fine just for this project. Let's make this a asynchronous function. And we're going to pass in params because we want to use the params to query our DB. And within this function, we want to pass in the ID and we want to set it equal to params. And we'll go, we'll need to create the function that, that has the ability to get a contact bias ID. So let's save the file for right now and go back to our data.js file. And within the data.js, we currently have the get all contacts, but now we need a way to get individual contacts. So we're going to add that within this file. So let's create a function called export const and get contact. And it's going to be a asynchronous function. Let's move this mouse out the way. And we're going to pass the ID to it so it knows what contact to get, and it's going to look for the contact that we send to it, which is the one that ends in, I think it's 6399. Yep. Excuse me. Let's start with the try catch block, and we'll need to begin within the try catch block by connecting to the database. And let's create a variable named contact. Let's set it equal to await contact, and we're going to go find by ID. And we're going to pass in the ID to it. And we do want to return this contact, not contacts, just contact. And right here, if we get an error, we want to throw new error, failed to get contact. And let's pass in the error because it is very descriptive and very easy to troubleshoot that way. And we can close this file out because we're done getting, we're done with the 2 GET requests. So we'll close this file out, and back in the single contact page, let's begin to build it out a little bit to make sure that we can see the data. So first thing we'll need to do is gain access to that function that we just created. So we'll create a variable named contact, and we'll set it equal to await. And we want to call the function that we just created, and it is get contact. And you'll notice that we have 2. Be sure to get the one that is singular. We named it without the S to represent a single contact. So we'll grab that contact and go ahead and call it. And within it, we want to pass in the ID that we just destructured from the params. And that's all we need to do. So we'll go ahead and start to style this page a little bit. So I'm just going to change the div to a section. And within it, I want to access the heading text. And we'll give it a title. We'll say single contact. We'll hit save. And we see it listed there. We'll give a description. And this description will be, what do we want to make this one? We'll make this view and update view. I think we're going to have the edit within this same file. No sense of creating another page. So we'll go view and update contact below. And let's pass in the nav bar. That way we have some navigation back to our home screen if we wish to have it. And we see it listed here. And underneath this, let's just make sure that we can, I'm not going to create a table or anything because I think I want to have a form to keep it simple. But I do want to make sure that we are getting the information. So I'm just going to test it out by going with contact.firstname. And underneath it, we'll go contact.lastname just to make sure. And if we hit save, we see that we're getting the name. And let's just add a BR to make it easier. And yep, you see that we're getting the name JJ and Jace, which is the first and last name of this contact. And to be sure, we'll go to our database just to check. And we see it listed there. So instead of placing this in a table or a card of some sort, I think I want to go ahead and create the update field and have it listed on the same page. So let's go ahead and create the function for our update field. And that is going to be a action because we're going to be actually doing something within the database. So we'll go with update contact first. So let's create the function. We'll call it export const update contact. And we'll go asynchronous function. And we'll pass in the form data to it. And we'll need to start by grabbing the information from our form. So I'm just going to copy the same thing that we have listed here because we could update any of this information. And underneath that form data object, we'll create a try catch block or add one, excuse me. And we know that we'll need to connect to the database first. And then we'll need to create a variable. And I'm going to call it update fields. And what this is if we make any changes on our front end, it's going to capture this information in these variables. And this is just basically destructuring it. First name, last name, email, phone. All right, yep, that looks good. And then underneath the update field variable, let's go with object.keys. And we're going to pass in the keys of update fields. And let's go with a for each loop. We want to pass in the key. And we want to, for that key, we want to update the fields. And we want to go with by key. And we'll come out of that, out of that bracket next to update fields. And next to it, we want to say if it is blank or undefined. And then outside of it, we'll go and delete update fields, and we'll pass back the key. And we'll save this and make sure I don't have any errors here. And this, all this is saying is that we want to update the fields. And this is just a little safeguard. If it is, the key is set to blank or undefined, we'll just set to delete. Otherwise, we want to update the fields with the data from the form that we just passed to it. So after that closing of the object keys, we want to add a wait. And what we're going to do now is grab that contact model. We want to find by ID and go down and select find by ID and update. And we want to pass in the ID of our contact. And we also want to pass in the update fields, which just represents what's on our form. So if we pass the value and we don't make any changes to a field, it's going to pass that field back to the database. But if we do make changes to the field, it's going to capture those changes, update the database, and then that's what we'll see on our front end. So we're going to go with the wait, and then we'll go contact model.find by ID and update. And of course, if we get an error, we want to throw the new error, and we'll go failed to update contact. We'll go with error. And I do want to redirect back to the home page or revalidate and redirect back to the home page in the event this works successfully. So now that we have this function created, let's go back to our single contact page and let's begin to display the single contact and have the ability to update it within this page. So underneath that nav bar, let's add a div and let's give it a class name of flex column to set the direction. And I like to give a little padding on the Y and padding on the X. And within the div, let's add the form. And we're going to pass a action to our form. And it's going to be the one that we just created. It's going to be update contact. And let's give some styling to this form for consistency. And I'm gonna go with class name. I think we set the background to gray 100. We'll set flex column to make sure. It should already be set the column, but let's just make sure. We'll set the items. No, it won't be set. I'm sorry. So we do need to do this. The items will be the center. We'll set the padding to 2, and we'll go rounded as well. And underneath the initial form tag, let's add another div. As a matter of fact, let's just go to our contact form, and we can copy this div. We can copy the 2 divs and the button for that matter. And we'll go back to our page, single page, and we can just paste in this form. And we know as we go down this form, the update contact remains the same. We didn't grab anything from the form, so that remains the same. We want the same layout. So let's see, we're getting an error, so I might have grabbed, yep, figured I did that. And let's just save it. There we go. If we refresh the page, we see that we have the exact same form. So I'll start here and just go with update contact. And instead of having these placeholders, let's change the placeholder to reflect the actual value. So instead of it saying first name, I'm gonna go with contact.firstname. And as you can see, it changes to JJ, which is the first name of our first contact. I'll do the same thing with last name. We'll go with contact.lastname. And you see it updates to Jace. Let's do the same thing with our email. And last but not least, let's go with contact.number. Phone. Hit save. Okay, so we see that the get is now flowing through to our form and it is displaying on the single page as we wished. Now we just need to make sure that the update action itself is actually working. 999, let's go with 222, 222, 2222. and hit update contact. You know what? Let me change this to value. There we go. Sorry about that. I had it set as placeholder. This should have been set as value, not a placeholder. Once you change this to value versus placeholder, the update works. As you can see, we have quad 2s, and let's just triple check it. We'll go to the next one, and we'll just set it to, I'm gonna go with 6s, let's go with 8s. And we'll set it to 8s, and as you can see, the edit works. So now the only thing that we have left is we'll save this file. We can close this terminal out. The only thing we have left is to implement the action of delete. So if you go back to the action.js file, at the bottom, we're going to add in our delete action. So let's just go ahead and name this function export const, and we'll go with delete contact. We'll make it async, and we'll go form data, and we'll start. Well, first we'll need to grab the ID of the contact that we want to delete. So we'll go with const. We'll go ID, and we'll set it to object.form data, and no, object.entries, I'm sorry, object.form entries, and then we'll pass in form data, excuse me. And let's hit save, and we'll do a try catch block, and we'll always start with the, let me pull this up, the connection to our database. We'll go db.connect, and we'll go with await, and we want to await the contact that we want to find by ID and delete, and we're going to pass in the ID to it. And underneath, we're going to go with old handy throw, new error, and we want to say failed to delete contact. And let's go with the error itself so we can see it. And we do want to revalidate in this particular instance. So it's just basically going to stay on the screen and just do a quick little refresh. So if we save this file, let's go back to the page.js within our main app directory that's on the home screen. And if we go down to the section, to the table detail row where we have our edit icon, underneath that link, you should have a form. And on that form, we want to give it an action. So within this form, we want to give it the action of delete contact that we just created, and make sure that you import it from your lib directory. And once you've added in that delete contact, the last thing we want to do, I see I put default value here. We want to add in the value of the, I think you can just do value. I think default value is in a different scenario. Been doing quite a bit of work with these server actions. But anyway, so right here where the input is hidden, because we don't want the user to see this, make sure you have the name set to ID and the value set to contact.id. If you have a button underneath that input within the form, the button is going to be represented by the trash icon. So we don't have to do anything with it, but let's just go ahead and save the file. And if we click on delete, we see that the contact is now deleted, and we'll delete the last one just to see, and we see that we don't have anything in our table. But if we were to a new contact, and we'll go with Shakira, we'll go with Jace, and we'll go with let's go Stanks at Gmail, and we'll go 787878787878, and hit create contact. We see that it works. If we click on edit, and we'll go, her new numbers is all 9s now. We hit update. We see that it works. So that completes it. There you have it. That concludes our full stack CRUD application, contact book application using Nextjs. We use server actions to build this CRUD application, mongoose and MongoDB to query and to store our data. A little bit of Tailwind and some Daisy UI as well. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, feel free to give me a like. Consider subscribing. And any suggestions, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.